My dear well-wishers, thanks Thomson Reuters, thanks Arun for inviting me here. Are you ready is the question for 1st July. Who is not ready is the second question. So the answer lies in between the two. Being a Thomson Reuters speech, I thought I will use a T-series to speak today on GST. What do you mean by a T-series? I think these are the key terms one should be familiar with to understand the circus called GST. When I say circus, I don't use it as a term of mockery. Performing a circus requires the best of talent, the best of focus, the best of grit, and the best of determination. Success of a GST is actually a circus. I shall demonstrate it in the next 40 minutes to you on how. The T-series starts with the first terminology, transformation. We are now getting into an era of a huge transformation. That's the start of the journey. And the terminal point of this journey is tax compliance, a terrain-free or a terrain-prone tax compliance. To put it slightly harsh, a terror-free or a terror-prone tax compliance. Where will we end up by resorting to GST? This is the terminal point. And the stakeholders for this transformation to this terminal point of tax compliance, you need to pass through transitions. And who are all the players in these transitions? Trade, 1T, trade bodies. These two form one side of the fence. People on the other side are the tax administration, another T, and the technology, another T. The success or failure of GST depends on these two, the performance of these two unknown fears, technology and tax administration. And why do I say that? We have now taken the 6 or 7 terms of T's today for the next 30-40 minutes for consumption. Transformation. India can now claim with pride that we are a mature democracy, having achieved GST. For the simple reason, 20 years of struggle, irreconcilable political parties with irreconcilable differences in the center and irreconcilable differences in the state, consigning their differences, have converged for an economic unity, resulting in this GST enactment. That's a big, big milestone achievement. We are a divided India politically, like any other democratic nation. But today we can claim that we have achieved a sense of economic unity, and that's transformation at a political level. Now, at a semi-bureaucratic level, we have achieved phenomenal success in this 1 year because of the GST Council's performance. Empowered Committee did not perform that well under the VAT regime because it was not a constitutional body. It did not get a constitutional status. Whereas GST Council is a body with a constitutional mandate and a constitutional status, and therefore it has a voice. Well, people can still say whatever GST says is only a recommendation. It doesn't have a force of law. True, because we are a federal setup, both union and states are partners in it, and therefore we can't, somebody cannot trust it on a state, because true federalism means state have their own powers and union has their own powers, and one can't overarch over the other. That's the essence of true federalism. But remember, because GST is a constitutional body, its recommendations in some way or the other has to be implemented. If not, if it goes for judicial review, courts are going to bless the advice of GST and make it into a law. Therefore, it will get a force of law. Either people should implement. If they don't implement, courts will ensure that their views are implemented. So that's the second transformation which we have achieved at that level. Now, the next transformation, the third degree transformation, are the two unknown fears: technology and tax administration. What do we mean by that? Rightly said by Brian, is it an opportunity risk or risking an opportunity? As long as it is not frisking an opportunity, I think we should welcome it. So where do we end up? And why do we say so? Let me take technology first. I'll give you a very simple simile for you to understand, as common man can understand. Take a mobile, push a number, whichever part of the globe, you're able to connect it in seconds. Same mobile, whichever part of the world somebody calls, you are able to receive it. How is this efficient? Because I'm a telecom counsel doing fairly critical matters in this industry, knows how difficult things with absolute precision is happening. Impossible, 10,000 miles away, you're able to connect it in a fraction of a second. How were you able to achieve it? Because of the technological compatibility amongst the players across the globe. An unknown service recipient, an unknown service provider connecting with unknown interconnect networks is able to achieve it. Why and how? We have argued a few of their contracts in courts. For example, a tower service provider who's called a passive infrastructure service provider in this country. If you see his contract with the telecom company, he has to work at an efficiency of 99.9 every month. And if you see the schedule of performance for peak towers, it says, if you fail the first time, so much of your service charge will be cut. If you fail 5 times in a month by disconnecting your service for less than 2 minutes, you will lose your service consideration for the whole month. So this is the level of efficiency you require to perform, to stay connected so that your calls, your internet services, your bandwidth works. This is the efficiency which, see, today we are simply a consumer of this efficiency by having a mobile in our hand, which is not connected with anything else. But this technology of GST, if it has to succeed, we need to achieve that accuracy of 99% efficiency at some point of time. And why do I say that and how do I say that? In terms of jurisprudence. I don't want to be talking about technology because people who are well versed with it will talk. I'm talking from the statutory perspective. What needs to be done? This law says, as we sit in a computer, you book a cargo, say from Mumbai to Delhi. You can sit in your computer and track the cargo today. It's possible. Now, Government of India and various states now want to know, sitting in their control room, they want to track down every transaction. In terms of its movement, in terms of its supply chain, more importantly, in terms of this invoice matching. That's the essence of GST. What do you mean by invoice matching? It says, it is the burden of every assessee to ensure he connects well with his anterior stage of supply and connects well with his service recipient. One who provides the supply, the assessee in question, and his recipient needs to be connected technologically and ensure amongst the three Every possible reconciliation that needs to be done in terms of invoices, in terms of quantities, in terms of description, in terms of rates, in terms of payments, in terms of failure, in terms of difference in tax credit, needs to be reconciled by these three people amongst themselves. So, what was their role till 30th June will now migrate as a responsibility on your head. And breach results in consequences under the law. So, imagine the number of invoices people generate every day. It wants you to upload it. It says 3 different returns, an outward return. See, one thing I want to be very clear, with 15 days away, and I've always sounded GST on a positive note. That has been my consistent stand. So we should be positive, and we will only try to see how we can achieve it. And Arun very clearly said what we need to do in the last 15 days. I'll give you a small menu as what you can all do and what all of us should do together with the governments to ensure that it works, it falls into place on 1st July. Which we understand 99% or 99.9% will happen for specific reasons. So this law says every possible detail has to be matched into the system for its seamless connectivity to ensure that tax credit is properly utilized and is not lost, and there is no loss to the exchequer. That's the bottom line. Because you pay tax at every stage and you're going to take credit at every stage, there cannot be a loss of tax or loss of the supply chain or a disconnect. Therefore, you can drive this law only through technology. Please understand it. It can't, otherwise it will fail. And technology, therefore, is an important transformation point, milestone in GST regime. And this has to be so foolproof as we are in terms of a telephone connection. We can't achieve it in day one, I agree. So what do we do till we achieve that efficiency? That's the focus I want to make, which you as assessees should understand, and the government should understand. So many people, the players should understand this is because we have not run a trial run at all. We are going to implement the law from 1st June. And it's going to take off as it is. There is no, when we were children, when we play cricket, first 3 balls will be trial balls. And then we'll go for the reals. This is all an all-real game, no trials. So how are we going to do it? So technology is one area of concern. You should tell me when I should end. 5 minutes before that. Sure. Lawyers in India love speaking. So you should tell me the... Lawyers everywhere. No, in the rest of the part, your time is measured by quotes. Now come to tax administration. Where is the concern? See, you must understand the birth of GST is a wonderful creation. I'll tell you why it's wonderful. It's neither list 1 or the constitution, union power, nor list 2, the state power, nor a concurrent list power by union and state. The difference in a concurrent list is both can legislate, but one has to yield to the other in case of a conflict. This is a unique power. What do you mean by a unique power? Union and state come together in a partnership. Watch out for a particular one single transaction called supply. Either it could be supply of goods or supply of services. That transaction of supply becomes a chargeable event, allowing the union and state to tax it together at the same point. It is not concurrent taxation, it is simultaneous taxation. That's the perceptual difference all of you should get into your mind. It's not concurrent taxation. It is a simultaneous taxation power. Because the transaction is one. They are not two. See, till 31st, you import computer parts, you pay customs duty. You integrate and assemble the computer parts, you pay excise duty. You sell that computer, you pay sales tax. You do an AMC on the contract, you do a service tax. You allow it to enter into your state, you pay entry tax. You allow it into a municipal area, you pay octroi. These are the kinds of taxes which we got inflicted into a goods scenario or in a service scenario. But today, you're going to have only one tax by two partners. So the unknown fear is, how will these two partners integrate themselves in taxing the assessee? It's like our popular simile which we do always. When there's a sensational corruption case of a politician, the state will say, I will do it. But public interest litigations will be filed to say, please move the fight to the CBI, we don't trust the state. So it's a fight between the local police and the CBI, what happens to a case. So it's something like that. The level of trust you need for these two partners to do a taxation together in the larger interest and protecting the interest of the assessee in question has not been experimented so far. And therefore it is an unknown fear. How are they? You may ask me, after all, each one is going to collect their share of half of 18%, half of 12%, half of, what's the problem? It is 14 or 9 or 6 or 0 or 2.5. What is the problem? That's not the problem. I'll give you one simple example. You have, besides a CGST and an SGST, you have something called an IGST. Now your problems are going to be, every IGST transaction will be questioned as a CGST and SGST transaction in the area of the destination state. It's possible. We have had this problem prior to 1956, resulting in Bengal immunity case. So, because you have a central levy and also a state and a central levy, the overarching areas of conflict could be, this money should go to IGST regime or this money should go into a CGST or an SGST regime will be there. If you do an IGST transaction, otherwise no. And like any other law, this law also has its own interpretative confusions. You have three, who is the service provider, who is the service recipient, three ground rules. Place of business, fixed establishments, nexus test. Now that is enough, you have three cards. So you will put card 1, he will say it's card 3. You will punch card 2, they will say it's card 1. This can happen. So how is tax administration going to take this into its kitty? And so far our experiences with the tax department has not been, take any assessee, it can be mild to harsh. So how are they going to react to this new scenario of doing it together? And the way they have divided the responsibilities, they say if it is a small assessee, 10:90, if it's a larger assessee, 50:50. This is the type of control they are talking about. My suggestion would be, the control should be a joint responsibility. Both should own the responsibility. See, in courts, beyond a point, you always argue cases at least before minimum 2 judges, whether it's a high court or a Supreme Court. Why? The ability to persuade, the ability to consult, the ability to arrive at a consensus. So if you give a joint responsibility, then one will not shirk. Otherwise, now the blame game will start. He will say, it's your responsibility. They will say, so by throwing the responsibility against each other, the assessee will perish in the process. So this is one major area of concern. Can they do this? Now, why are we worried? These two areas we are worried about is, there is not enough visibility as on date as to what sort of a groundwork have they done. That's not reported. It's not in domain. This is the milestone we have achieved. This is the integration we have achieved. This is how these officers will handle. This is how the grievance will be addressed. You don't have a protocol even today. We are just 16, 17 days away from this law. You don't have a protocol how this tax administration is going to implement this law. Therefore, it remains an unknown fear. It's justified. It's justified. I wouldn't blame the trade to say, how are we going to handle it? But let's Now, what is the silver lining? We need to move with hopes, always, as human beings. We should brave, we should move, because it's now a reality. GST is now irreversible. That decision is irreversible. And it will do good to us as a long-term tax solution. We can now, see, competing countries, they had an edge over India. Why? They always said, in India, don't do it, because your last mile taxation, you have several issues. That was one selling point for competing countries. Now we can compete with them and say, you don't have a last mile solution problem anymore in India, because we are now having one nation, one market. Theory is something which we can promote. Of course, with all these hiccups, because we are in the migrating stage. So tax administration has a huge role and responsibility to pay. Now, how can this technology and these two issues, the unknown fears, what do we do it when we get into 1st July? That's the point. We will assume it to be 1st July. Till 2-3 days back, whenever I talked, I was sensing a hope at least that it can move out to 1st September. But it looks to be tough. And there are reasons. There is one strong reason is this. See, it is a political decision rather than a trade decision. If you allow one shift to happen, then there is a capability of political parties to water it down on 1st September. And if you water it down on 1st September, you have only 15-day window, the law will expire. You need to put it in place before 15th September. Otherwise, you have to run through the process once over again. So, they don't want to do this shifting. There is no other reason, big reason. See, after all, are we not used to even small tax returns, last filing dates, how many times Government of India has extended it? So, extending it by 2 months is not a problem. But this will send a wrong signal politically, and it can destabilize the implementation of GST. And therefore, government is unwilling. So let's bite out today with a thought that if it still differs, it differs. But it's unlikely that it will be deferred. So you must be prepared for the 1st July cutoff point. No compromises. No. Now, when you get into 1st July, are we ready from tax administration? Are we ready from technology? See, we can be ready with technology as far as we are concerned. But the law requires you to integrate these three, anterior and the subsequent stage. And a huge company having branches all over, offices all over India with multiple suppliers in services and multiples. Imagine just for a minute, put it in your screen. One into branch into multiple into service providers. One into branches into multiple service recipients. All of them should come online on July 1st for you to begin. Even the most perfect country can't do this. Let's understand the reality. Government, I think, should understand and will understand. So, how are we going to handle the situation on July 1st? Similarly, when this new tax administration of the state and union trying to now nudging, pushing, killing, anything can happen, from anything to anything, they are not trained. Because its alignment is something. See, how do you suddenly become a big boss to a new company with a new team? You'll have to align yourself. It takes time. Human relationship takes time in everything. So, the assessment, see, there will be a complex. Center officer will think he is superior, state officer will think he is superior, and in the process, assessee will try to say whom should he please to ensure his GST and returns are all properly done. This is all something which will take time. So how are they going to be prepared? So here comes the role of two bodies, the GST Council and the trade bodies. They have a huge role to play in the next 6 to 9 months to ensure that the law can be in place. It will take at least that much time. Now, what should we suggest to the government? We are okay with 1st July. We will not stop the law from coming into force. But let them find out a reasonable time, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, whatever they choose. They should, Government of India and the respective states should allow dual process to function for some time. This is a very, very, very important process step which we should all recommend. Trade should recommend, big industry should recommend, and trade bodies should recommend. You should do dual. What do you mean by dual? Let technology be in place, but you are entitled to keep your backup records manually or in a semi-technological phase. You should not be found fault merely because one person is not connected with you technologically and you are not able to be 100% efficient. This is something which the government should consider. I'm telling you why, because this law says, I'm not saying this law says it gives the power to the GST Council. If there are issues of concern and the GST Council recommends these are all issues of concern, then governments cannot penalize such defaults. The law says so. I'm not saying on my own. So when there is a statutory power, the government should be allowed to exercise that statutory power and discretion to say, we will permit you. Now we understand they are talking of bills of entries to be filed manually. They are thinking about it. This e-way bill issue is still to be sorted out. Not a complete solution has not come to that. So they are thinking of, government is also thinking on these lines. So I think the commercial capital city should take some initiative in this regard and move proper documentation to the government. Don't push for deferment, it's not going to work. So push for this at least, that dual system should be allowed to function for a reasonable time. That's the first request we should make. What you should do in the next 15 days. That's the first take home. The second take home is tax administration. A cohesive tax administration to fall in place is going to take time. So any interface with them is a new experiment. Trade and trade bodies should be allowed to register. I wouldn't say grievance. Let's not start with grievance. Let's go in a positive mode. Should be allowed to register the issues of concern that throb up as the regime starts progressing with the GST Council, so that we should not be asked, they should not say you go to the principal commissioner, you go to the regional commissioner, no. 6 to 9 months, because now the government is of the view, once GST is in place, it's like the gynecologist and the pediatrician. Till the child is delivered, it's the responsibility of the gynecologist. The second the child is delivered, it becomes the responsibility of the pediatrician. It's the same child. 1 minute before Dr. A was handling, 1 minute later now we'll say, no, it's your baby, you have to push it. We don't want such confusions. So let GST Council take the responsibility of registering the concerns that is happening over a period of 6 months. They should take it so that it is centralized. The problems, see, we are not going to have rate issues or service classification issues immediately. Don't worry about it. States won't be that aggressive. They've understood any aggression. See, one of the states is not aligning today in GST. Do you think the state will remain so? Because it will get isolated. Once you get isolated, you are going to defeat the trade. The very trade in that particular state will be affected. So it will fall in line at some point of time. No worry at all. So this force of attraction rule will work in its own way to ensure that everybody joins the bandwagon. So those things will fall into place, no worry. But this ongoing tussle of administering the law is going to throw some concerns. These concerns should be allowed to be registered with the GST Council, and to ensure a proper protocol is processed and a dossier is prepared of the host of issues and the host of solutions. Till such time, except default in tax payment, every other lab should be condoned. Because we are in a new era. If there is no tax payment, then hold this column. But for non-payment of taxes, every other lapse arising out of technological issues, lapses or concerns arising out of tax administration issues needs to be condoned, needs to be only then you will see. It's like nurturing a baby in the womb of a mother. You need to nurture it if you want to deliver a good baby. So the role of GST Council post 1st July, it has three major roles to play. Will continue to play. It has to be very, very empathetic. It has to be ready for preventive exercises. It should prescribe the preventive measures. It should also be ready to dish out remedial measures for issues of concern. These are the three major roles which the GST Council has to play. If we have to allow this to become a success story. So now this GST Council, you can't flood the GST Council with emails by individuals. So you should modulate it. That now out of the 4 T's, 2 T's on one side, trade and trade bodies, technology and tax administration on the other side. GST Council should ensure it can only receive and register online issues only if it is represented to a trade body. So that you limit your concerns. You don't go out and say today there is a power fluctuation, I couldn't upload my invoice, what should I do? We can't be writing all this to the GST Council. So it should, any issues of concern should flow through a proper registered trade body. The trade body will represent to the GST, and the GST will issue a proper dossier over a period of time. There must be a constant review every fortnight of the issues that is throbbing up, and a proper remark to be flashed periodically so that the rest of the country can organize its affairs. Something happening in Bombay, if it is known to Hyderabad, then Hyderabad can react to it accordingly. So this sort of an exercise, let GST Council create a cell. We have no issues. When I say GST, it's not that ministers should sit and start answering it. No. But the responsibility should be with that council. Only then it will work. If you delegate it, then it all becomes whether this jurisdiction or that jurisdiction which we are familiar with. Then nobody works. Then it becomes nobody's baby. So these are the 3 key tasks ahead from 1st July. If you are very particular to implement the law from 1st July. This implementation must have this protection. This implementation must have this platform. See, today you have ASPs and the GST. For example, till yesterday, many I was addressing a forum. They thought GST and platform is something, a superior boss to ASP. No. GSTN is just a platform to flow information. It's only a platform. It's not that they don't process. Whereas ASP takes the responsibility of processing the information. So now the question is, who will take the responsibility of a technology failure? But who is going to be affected? Affected is assessee. The defaulter is assessee. So the blame game will start. He will push it on the GSTN. GSTN will push it on the AS. So these things are likely to happen. We should be ready. So this gestation period is very, very critical, and success or failure of GST depends on how they handle this for the next 6 to 9 months. And these are my 3 take-home issues for each one of you to carry. Of course, there are, if you talk in law, I'm allowed to talk, but there is so much and so little time now. For example, structurally speaking, get out of your mind, it's no longer excise duty, it's no longer sales tax, it's no longer VAT, it is a supply tax. It's a supply of goods, supply of services. When you say supply, it has several avatars. Continuous supply, composite supply, mixed supply, exempted supply, non-taxable supply, zero-rated supply. I think enough for all professionals and to feel, okay, we will know loss of business because of GST. Just to throw you an example, what is the difference between a composite supply and a mixed supply? Go to the bazaar, buy bread, buy jam. The seller has a choice to bill bread separately, jam separately. If he chooses to be smart and integrates them and puts one bill, then the law says it's a mixed supply. The highest of the two rates will prevail. Now this hotel buys the bread and jam and serves it to each one of us in our table and charges for that consumption. The same bread and jam becomes a composite supply for us. Because the essence of a composite supply is an unbundled delivery. For the hotel, when it places an order, it is it can be a segregated delivery. It can choose to buy bread from one source and jam from another source. But when the hotel serves it for us, we don't have a choice to say bread from here and jam from there. It comes from the same source, therefore it becomes a composite supply. Then the legal interpretation goes a different color. So this type of finer nuances, or how do we do a turnkey contract, how do we handle a cost for all beach class. Now you say composite supply, the principal supply will be the essence to tax, they say. Okay, what do you mean by principal supply? You contract supply of goods from Mumbai to Calcutta, a consignment, a cartload of goods. You take insurance, you take bank policy, you take transportation, all these are services, bundle services, then the goods, the taxable service will be the supply of goods. All right, because it's a taxable supply, no problem. Suppose you supply milk. Milk is exempt. So you do the insurance for the container, you do the transportation. Revenue is going to say, no, the principal supply is only the bank, the insurance or the transportation. We are unconcerned with goods because goods are exempted. So these types of controversies are bound to. In fact, I was, to close it out, I was saying the finer difference in a composite supply. You go and give your car in a garage for an AMC, for a repair. He changes those parts and also uses his labor. So it's a combination of goods and sweat, and therefore it is a composite supply. Fine for a car. You go and get admitted in a hospital and undergo a heart surgery, a stent installation. That's also a maintenance contract for the human body. How do you deal that? Do you deal it as a composite supply? Supreme Court says no, it's a pure service. Why? What is the difference? See, when Supreme Court decides a law, it has to have a finer jurisprudence to back it up. And who has written this judgment? Other than our one of the finest judges, Her Ladyship Ruma Pal in BSNL, brings out the distinction by saying, when you go to the garage and hand over your car, you mentally, both contracting parties decide what part should be put and at what price it should be negotiated with. Therefore, there is a consensus addendum for goods and services, and therefore it could be composite or it could be a works contract. But when you go for a stent installation, you don't sit before the doctor, show me all the stents, I will choose one, what I like. Please save my life. That's all I want. Whichever stent it works, you put it up. So there is no consensus addendum between the patient and the doctor to decide what he wants. The doctor prescribes what the patient needs. And therefore, because there is no consensus, even though stent goods, when the hospital buys the stents, it is supply of goods. But when the hospital inserts a stent in a heart, it's not supply of goods. It is a pure service. So such finer nuances will come into forefront to keep us all engaged for the rest of our lives. It was a pleasure talking to each one of you. It's a lovely opportunity, and I wish you all the very best. It's easy to talk on 1st July, be ready. I know how difficult it is to brave it up on 1st July, to stand up and say, my invoice takes 15 minutes to get uploaded. Starting from that, issues will throb up. So
a couple of words on anti-profit.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, you told me. See, this is a very success of GST also depends on how efficiently anti-profiteering gets monitored. What do you mean by it? It is something very new to this law. We have done enough in transfer pricing and in other laws, but not in indirect taxation. What do you mean by anti-profiting? See, the presumption is this. We have been suffering so far an indirect taxation of close to 32-33% if you combine all the taxes put together. Now the government says we have now brought it down to 0, 5, 12, 18 and 28. So if something which was subjected to 33% is now to suffer 18%, there is a gap of 15%. It can't go as a windfall gain in the hands of the supply chain. They don't want this 15% to be hoarded or cornered and kept by the industry and the supply chain. They say very clearly this 15% should transform into a benefit in the hands of the consumer. So there is an obligation on your part. See, neither income tax nor any law can say this should be your level of profit. Your margins can be anything. That's your choice. They can't interfere with that. There is no law under the constitution which can interfere with your profit making unless otherwise it's a product falling under the Essential Commodities Act or drug control or such controlled commodities. It doesn't interfere with your, people are thinking it's a constitutional right for me to earn profit. No, they are not worried about you make whatever profit you want. But the tax component cannot be part of your profit. The difference of between 18% to 33% can't be your profit. The law is very clear that should be passed on to the consumer. So onus is on you now to open up and show your cost statement. In fact, there is a lot of concern by the trade. See, you are asking an ASP to take my invoices and upload it, a GST and to move all these invoices, and the government can watch invoice matching. So what happens? My competitive pricing is lost. Of course, you will have confidentiality clauses, all that is fine. But be prepared, we are now getting into an era where one more T, transparency, is also going to be part of GST. So you have to win your contracts with better efficiency, better merit, better talent rather than better pricing. So someday you should be prepared. How confidential it's going to be, let's wait and see. But be prepared that it may not be confidential anymore. Be prepared and have your plans that way. So anti-profiteering, and what does it mean? See, this is to reduce it from an economic principle, inflationary effects, all those. And there's a concern. For example, in Canada and New Zealand, governments which brought GST went out of power. They lost elections. So these are all the concerns, political, economic, all that. But ultimately I apply common sense. To me, the assessee before us is more important than the unknown entities of governments and all. For an assessee, you are under an obligation to disclose your costs. And you must have proper evidence to show that if there is a rate reduction, that rate reduction has not migrated as profits into your books. It's very clear. And the consequences will therefore follow suit. This is how I look at it.